Metaphors are very powerful in magic. In fact, almost all magic is a metaphor. It's a way of talking about something that we really don't have good words for, so we say something else that's either close enough or able to communicate what we're saying to others, we hope. Myths are compendiums of metaphor, and they are a powerful thing to be used in magic. Now, some people get caught on historicity, and as you know, that's a game we don't play in this house, because magic feeds off of meaning and connection. As long as you can find meaning and connect with the story, there's magic in it. We're going to talk about Arthurian quests and how you can use them in your magic today as we walk together down creation's paths. Hello everyone, my name is Charlie. I am a Christopagan Druid and Priest of Bridget.
Hello everyone, my name is Brian. I am a Christopagan Druid and sous chef to the Dagda.
Today we're going to be talking specifically about the Grail Quest, but I'm going to kind of allude to a couple others that I am thinking about incorporating into my mythological cycle and possibly what I'm doing for next year's Yule, which is going to be spookier and scarier than what I'm doing for Samhain. It's very helpful to understand how we can use myth and story to help us in our magic, because all magic is, at the end of the day, chaos magic, and we're just kind of putting words onto energies to be able to have better access and connection to them. Before we get into all that, if you haven't already, don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, whatever the terminology happens to be on whatever app you're listening to us on. We do original Christopagan and Druidic content 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, and you don't want to miss a thing. We're also doing 12 days of Christmas, so you'll get 12 days in a row of stuff themed after the 12 days of Christmas. That's going to be fun and a lot of work. I'm not worried at all.
To cast a little hexing spell and make some fun, and a reference to someone who's lots of wrong thinking, myth doesn't care about your facts, only your feelings.
Which is very true. Well done, bravo.
I thought you'd enjoy that one. In the spirit of your people.
It really is true. It really is the way of things, because we misunderstand what a metaphor is. We have to start with something that we should have learned in grammar school, and some people had a hard time with it. Myths and similes are close to each other. So a simile would be, he ran like a deer. We're saying these are similar. He ran like a deer. His running is similar to a deer. Simile. We're pointing out a similarity. Okay? Metaphors are different. A metaphor would be, he was a deer running in the woods. There's no like about it. Now, based on other context clues, we can start asking questions, because we're not talking about similarity. See, when we're saying he ran like a deer, we're saying he was probably nimble, quick, maybe running in a kind of hopping motion. We're trying to create a similarity between between these two things. The metaphor is doing something different. He was a deer in the woods running. Now, if I say from a hunter, a lot more questions start coming in. Is he prey? Is he a trophy? See, a lot more meanings are coming in. We still get this image of a nimble person running through the woods. That simile part is in there. But I've now added more context to the metaphor. Oh, is he being hunted as prey? Is he being hunted as a trophy? Why is he being hunted? You see, we've added all of these images in there that we're pulling up. More than likely, he is innocent if he's being hunted by, say, a bounty hunter and as a deer in the woods, then he's probably innocent.
This is also where personal context kicks in, because I love the drama. And so I'm like, oh, what did he do? Why are you running away? Context, and being also mindful of your own personal parts of it, because you partake in these things. You are also involved in the story now, just as a listener.
It makes a very big difference if I say he runs like a deer. He runs like a rabbit. We're now thinking different. Rabbits hop, right? But if I say he was a deer, certain type of ideas come forward, right? He's running. He's trying to get away. He's trying to get somewhere, but he's running. If I say he was a rabbit, rabbits hide. And so I'm carrying all of this other meaning with the term. You may think I'm going overboard, but people miss metaphors and misunderstand metaphors so much. I want to make sure that we're clear on what a metaphor is, because that's how myths work. Myths are collections of metaphors. They're very often telling a story, even if it's a historical story, in a way that has a different meaning and purpose. Hamilton is a myth. It is not a retelling of a historical story, even though it is the retelling of a historical story. Now, we can dissect it and take it apart and look at how well did he get the history right and all of that. We can take it apart and look at how the casting relates to the historical people that they're playing and all that, analyze on those levels. Or we can take it at face value and try to interrogate what it itself is trying to say. The Wizard of Oz was very carefully crafted as a metaphor. It was very carefully crafted as a myth. And we can either rely on Frank Baum's ideas of what the story was supposed to mean or what it means to us. What does the Yellow Brick Road mean to us? What do the slippers mean to us? Depending on whether you read the book or watched the movie, they're either silver or ruby, because they're different in the book and in the movie. What do the flying monkeys mean? Because it's different in the book and in the movie, and even different still in Wicked, right? We're carrying all of these meanings with us. What do they mean? What do they come from? It doesn't always matter what the author intended. It doesn't often matter what the historical moment is that is being utilized in the story. It's what does it mean to us? So when I'm talking about Arthurian legend, we could, if we wanted to, try to put it in some kind of a historical time frame and say, oh, this is in post-Roman Britain at a certain time. This is in post-Roman France. Remember, there's a big question over whether King Arthur was a French or a English king, mainly because a lot of the stories have him in France doing French things, like the Norman stories, if you will. He's a Norman hero, so he's both French and English, right? Is he Welsh? There are wonderful Welsh stories about Arthur that are very different. We try to put them in their historical context, and if that is something that is meaningful to you, do it. We can also go through the various iterations of these stories and either try to homogenize them into a story that we want to tell or pick our favorite. I am not really homogenizing in my work, but I am picking. I am choosing through my magical work to retell stories that I'm interested in because I am enacting them in some way.
And not only that, but they're also getting recontextualized once again from our perspective in our times.
Yep.
For me, the biggest thing, especially right now, as we're preparing for Christmas, for Advent, and we're preparing for the Arthurian Quest, part of that is the story of the Fisher King. And right now, that story is so relevant to our lives. We have basically the king about to be on the throne and do mad things and foul the land, and we're going to have to live
because of a wound that will not heal.
Because of a wound that will not heal.
Why didn't your daddy tell you he loved you?
Really? Like, oh, there's so many different stand-ins in the story for that wound that won't heal. Like, so many wounds that won't heal.
But
so we go on this quest for the Grail because we want to bring healing back to the land. Because we know that in the end, after all the other madness is over, healing will come back to the land. It will get healed. It will get better.
The version of the Fisher King that is my favorite, and the one that tends to be my go-to, is the one in Sir Thomas Malory's telling, which is a late telling. Remember, he wrote this while in prison during the War of the Roses. So this is a late period retelling of the story that's really looking at the question of, is chivalry even a thing? You know, was knighthood a lie? It's very deconstructive of the whole thing while at the same time trying to find some kind of hope in the dark times that Malory was living in. And yes, I will always call it that because I had an old English professor admonish me that if I ever called it by the French name, he would disown me because that was a name ascribed to it later that Malory did not use. These are the works of Sir Thomas Malory, and not to use the French name. So I cannot use the French name. I still live in fear of Mr. McDonough. Will always live in fear of Mr. McDonough, and that's just how I am. But that's my favorite version of the Fisher King story. But my favorite Grail story actually comes from Wolfram's wonderful Parzival, where the Grail, which, by the way, this gets redacted later because the church threatened to burn him at the stake and condemn him as a heretic for it, and they kind of convinced the king that you did a bad thing. And so a couple chapters later, this story gets retconned in there because these stories were being performed. They were being written and performed for the royal court. So they are very much serialized, and based on the feedback he was getting from his patron, the stories do change over time. But in the first version, the unredacted versions, the Grail is not the cup from the Last Supper. The Grail is a stone in heaven that is so powerful that when the war breaks out in heaven, whoever possesses this stone will win. It is the one ring to rule them all. It is the one thing. And Wolfram never explains why. Like, can the stone just bring life? Does it just bring victory to everybody who has it? Is it like, can they just use it and destroy all? He never explains why exactly this stone is so powerful, but just that it is. And so while the angels and demons are fighting, a third group, and this is what he got in trouble for, a third group of neutral angels stole the stone and hid it. So neither the angels or the demons would have an unfair advantage. That they could go off on their squabbles and their fights, but they would not be able to have this advantage. Over time, the stone ends up making its way down to Earth, and it ends up becoming the Grail. And because of redactions, we don't know if it was originally intended to have been carved into a cup, or if it just had an indent in it where it could be used as a cup, or if it was just going to be a stone for the whole story. Because again, he was kind of threatened over this whole neutral angel portion of the story and changed it. And so it becomes your more standard Grail chalice towards the end of
the
this.
Imperial Church put their heel on that scale and shifted everything.
I find this really compelling because we know whether or not the chalice that is in Spain is the actual Grail or not. The cup that would have been used at the Last Supper would have been made from stone. We know that that is kosher. The kosher laws for what could be used on such a ritualistic table for such a ritualistic meal at that point in time, especially for you could use glass, but glass was so expensive. It would have been stone. It could not have been clay. Clay is porous and could not have been used on the table. And it could not have been wood, because again, wood is porous and could not be used at the table. It would have had to be something they could have afforded, and it probably would have been stone. So regardless of whether or not that Grail is the Grail, right? The chalice that would have been used would have been made out of stone. And so this is headcanon, right? We're crafting a ritual here. This is that stone. That stone somehow makes it down there, ends up on the table, ends up getting used, and I get to incorporate it into a bunch of the other Grail legends from that point. I can also connect it to any of the previous Grail legends, because maybe before it was cut, it was one of the cauldrons or platters from the earlier stories that get merged into the Grail story. I've given myself options in my personal retelling. Because remember, I'm not writing a doctoral thesis on this. I'm not writing the definitive Grail story. And when you're doing this kind of work for yourselves, for ritualistic purposes, you're not either. There's this weird tendency to be like, we have to find the true, the original, the whatever. If that's where your heart is and what connects you, do it. I don't have that connection to any of these stories all the way through. So, hey-ho, eclecticism.
It's like with the Parzival stories in the Grail Quest. They resonate a lot with me, partially because I'm often, like, Parzival will just get very excited about something, champion it, and take off running full speed in a direction. Often not necessarily the right direction, but I've got gusto and I'm going full speed. This storytelling, the spiritual growth that can come from that is realizing when you have a Parzival, you can first of all spot when you have a Parzival in your life, and knowing that in living with right relationship with them, in none of the quests does anybody stand up and go, you're wrong, and stop them from charging off towards the horizon on their quest. All you can do in living with the right relationship with that Parzival is to try to help them, to support them, and if you're lucky, bump them and knock them a few degrees in the right direction, maybe help shorten the quest some, or maybe help them realize, because eventually, maybe in their own growth, they'll come to that point where they realize they're Parzival and can learn ways to shorten their quest time. Because for a lot of the Parzivals, the journey is actually the most important part of the quest. It's not how long they're on it or the destination. It's that they go on that journey.
It's the lessons you learn along the way.
It's the lessons they learn along the way. And so if they can only have to go a quarter mile to learn those lessons or a quarter year to learn those lessons instead of the full year in the day, wonderful. But you got to let them do the journey still.
I really love the Grail story because it allows us to have so many metaphors to hold on to. One of my personal favorites, and it's not really a formal prayer, though if I do ever write this out to share with people, I might try to write it as one. But I always kind of remind myself that in my heart, I feel like I am a Galahad, and I am on a straight line to the Grail Castle to save the day, but I'm not. I am Parsifal meandering around, who one day will happen upon a thing that will happen upon a thing that will happen upon the castle, and I will happen upon the solution that I am looking for. So no matter how much I think that I am a Galahad, I am a Parsifal. If you're familiar with the stories, that probably resonated with you too. If you're not familiar with the stories, yeah, Galahad is just the chosen one. Like, he is the chosen one, the Arthurian knight. Everything Galahad sets his mind to, he gets. Like, they're basically three brothers, and one always succeeds, one is always doing the dumb thing, and one gets himself killed because his anger's just, like, out of control. And they all have one trait, and Galahad's trait is he's a living embodiment of that DJ Khaled song, All I Do Is Win. Because that's all he does, he wins. So much of the time, we do think of ourselves in that context of, I am the Galahad. I have found the way. I know what I'm doing. And anytime I have that kind of spirit of Galahad upon me, I stop and go, oh, but I'm actually the holy fool. It's one of the reasons I insist on having silliness in my practice and in my faith, because Parsifal, in the way that Wolfram spells it, means holy fool. He's literally calling him the holy fool. Reminding myself of that is so helpful to not develop the ego that I see in a lot of spiritual practitioners who feel like they have found the way, big capital T, the way, when none of us really have. We're all just kind of feeling it out to the best of our ability. Now, you and me have found the best way for you, and that's great. More power to you. But a lot of these experiences aren't as universal as we want to pretend that they are. And, well, I said that wrong. The experiences tend to be universal, but the pathways to them and the processes to achieving them are not. And so reminding myself that I am that holy fool is very helpful to me. And it's not a way of denigrating myself. Parsifal is one of my favorite characters in the Arthurian cycle. I absolutely love him. I love that he got up one day and was running around in the woods, and he saw a bunch of knights ride by in their shining armor and went, angels! And he runs to his mom. I was like, I saw angels. And his mom's like, no, dear, those were knights. But they were shiny. Yeah, that's metal. They were wearing armor. Like your dad. Your dad was a knight. Oh, I wasn't supposed to say that. My dad was a knight. People could be knights. I want to be an angel. And off he goes, like running into the woods, trying to find his way to the castle so he could be a knight. And I love that kind of wild-eyed, just, there's something about Parsifal that I love him so much as a character. And it's probably because I do resonate with that. I am that, I'm not one to often point at things and go, angels, and run off after them. But I have the ADHD as well, like my patron Saint Parsifal, and I get hyper-focused on something and run off into the woods and hopefully find my way to food, shelter, and safety. Yeah, it happens. I get it. I feel it. This is very much my patron saint in so many ways. And that's one of the reasons why when we were talking about our practice this year, we didn't want to sit back and really detail it, because I don't want to come across as saying you should do a Grail Quest. I don't even though we're talking about Arthurian mythology here, say that you should do necessarily something Arthurian. These are things that we grew up with that are very meaningful to us and that we have a lot of connection with. And I want to be talking about what I'm kind of thinking about doing next year, and hopefully it's not foreshadowing. I've already started having thoughts of what to do next year. Finding a story that you want to enact, because this is what ritual is. Good ritual, good ceremony is the reenaction of a story. To do it symbolically, to do it with all of our knowledge of how magical correspondences work. Like, I am seeking the Grail, but I'm also making the Grail every day, right? We've talked in previous episodes about drawing the energy up, down, and mixing it. And we talked about this actually yesterday in yesterday's episode if you missed it. So I'm technically making the Grail every day, whether I'm doing it in the morning or in the night or sometimes both. This is a practice I am doing daily, which technically, yes, means I am finding it every day. But in this month-long ritual that I am doing, it's seeing the procession of the Grail. Now, several times they see the procession of the Grail. And whether that's just the chalice itself floating around in the woods, like, wow, that's an image. Sometimes it's being held on a platter by sometimes angels, sometimes women. I think there's one story that I read where it's literally like on the saddle of a horse, like it has its own horse. Which, how wind horse is that image?
I always thought that was the questing beast. It was actually not the horse. The horse was hiding as the questing beast, but that's why the chalice is there, because,
Well, this is also where...
the horse was to have a holy grail.
But see,
the questing beast.
But see, this is where having access to this mythology is very helpful, because if you're not familiar with the questing beast is a chimera. It can change its shape and look like whatever it wants to look like at any time it wants to look like that. And everybody quests for the questing beast and nobody can catch it because it's never really the same thing twice. So when you go out questing after the questing beast, you're just wasting your time. And learning what in your life is a questing beast and what is not is a very valuable tool.
Very valuable. Because then you can go, that's an ooze shiny. Lots of fun, but also no. Or you know how much of that you want to engage in. Because yes, the physical exercise is good. And if you've got time to go running off into the woods and get the physical exercise, yay. But know that you're just chasing a new shiny and let it go when it's appropriately time to let it go.
And so ask yourself what you want to be doing. Don't do things because they're trendy. Like, I don't even know if anybody's doing Arthurian magic anymore. I learned my Arthurian magic from books that are probably ancient by modern standards. I learned them from Dion Fortune and Gareth Knight, who wonderful books out there on Arthurian magic and ways to do it. Highly recommend them if you've never read them. Definitely check them out. I love Dion Fortune in many ways, though. Just a warning, she can be very Victorian at times. Like, she is a woman of her time and says things that are, I would have words with her if she were if Violet were a living modern woman and still had some of her opinions. But of the older sources, I really do like her work. I know that there are others. I have looked into some of those. John Michael Greer has a book about Grail magic. He also has a book about the magic of Merlin, which is interesting. I've kind of dabbled in playing around with some of the imagery from there. If this is something that is interesting to you, it's pretty much Kabbalah, Hermetic Kabbalah, but he draws the names of the Sifra from a Welsh prayer and does so in a way that I think both complements the Hermetic Kabbalah and expands it into a very interesting Druid space. He expands on that more in some of his other works on Druidic and Celtic Kabbalah that he's written. I think he's done some interesting work in that area. If that's something that would interest you, there are resources out there if this is something that you want to play with. And really, this is something to play with. Anytime we're engaging with mythology, which is different from doing deity work, I am not invoking the god Parzival. And I think when you're doing spirit or deity work, you need to be a bit more serious and careful and make sure that you're, dotting your I's and crossing your T's and not doing anything to cause offense. But when you're doing this kind of mythological work, where you're not dealing with a specific spirit or deity, you can allow yourself to have more of that freedom to play and to test out and to see how you can make it work for you. Because this is not working within a particular religious framework, and it's not working with a specific series of spirits. And every time I have done this, because I've done a Grail Quest several times in my life, and it has always turned out differently than I expected, which I think is how all Grail Quests should end. Now, some people use the Grail as a symbol of enlightenment, and I have feelings about that, but they're not for here. I do have some stuff on Wizard Fairy about that. I think enlightenment is a stretch goal we will be stretching towards. I don't mind stories about enlightened people in the past. I have a very hard time accepting the idea of modern people with us. I think enlightenment exists in a kind of in-between liminal place between myth and reality.
To speak in terms of today's episode, it comes after you face the Green Knight and you still keep your head.
Yes. Find a story that you want to do. And this is something that you may do on the spur of a moment and kind of construct a little ritual for yourself. Or this is something I thought about last year and have kind of been figuring out what I wanted to do all year. And that's why I'm already thinking about next year.
Because honestly, a lot of these are in terms of a year and a day anyhow. Yeah. So giving yourself a year and a day to do it or a year to do it, it's actually right in line with it. But once again, it doesn't have to be.
And so next year, I think the quest that I'm going to go on in Advent, leading towards Yule, leading towards Alban Arthur, is going to be inspired by Taliesin's story of Arthur's adventures in the Otherworld. Because it keeps popping into my mind. I can think of some things that could be done there, some possible actual spirit work that could be a part of that, but just some internal growth and some spiritual growth that I think could be drawn from that. I think it'd be a very interesting thing, because if you've not read it, it has some really dark themes to it. I think that it could lend itself very interesting to this season as a way to ritually practice this season. As we get closer to next year's holiday, I will know more for sure, but that's kind of where I'm thinking next year is doing Arthur's adventures in the Otherworld. And if you've never read Talias's version of that, it is available online and not the easiest poem to read. It is not the easiest poem to read. You kind of need to know who people are. It doesn't really explain who people are. Most English translations, if you find a decent one, will have footnotes that will at least let you know what certain words mean, because you can get lost in it fairly easily. But it is out there. There are a lot of stories out there that you can really do this with. And I will say, because while I am a druid at heart, I do kind of groove on a lot of ideas from chaos magic, like I think a lot of modern practitioners do. And if you want to reenact a story from Star Wars or something else as part of your magical practice, mythology is stories that you connect to, that have those metaphors that you can chew on, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be ancient, doesn't have to be from a great tradition. It just has to be meaningful to you, and understanding that you're working with these energies as metaphors. You're not going to invoke the spirit of Superman. But that person who said that on TikTok, please stop. You know who you are. I doubt you'll ever hear this, but like, I get it. I know how, I could see how you could do a ritual to do that, but it's not, there's not a spirit of Superman. Superman is not a deity. Superman could be a thought form for a deity in terms of chaos magic. That's a whole other side road that if you ever want us to take, we can take you down. But working with metaphors is a very powerful way to connect us to ourselves. And that was always done through the folk tales of the people. If there are folk tales that you connect with, you can try this with it. If there aren't and you want to do the Hobbit, do the Hobbit.
Yeah.
There really is no difference. As long as you are using them metaphorically and that you are doing your magic, the names and stuff don't matter as much as the connection and the energy that you put into it. So yeah, that's how to do this with story. It's a magical experience, and I've often thought maybe for April Fools this next year, doing an episode on the as if it were a proper pagan pantheon, because why not? I don't know. We'll see. But again, as valid as any other names you want to slap on things, because names are hands pointing at a moon. And while yes, I am contracted and work with Bridget, and I do believe that there is a Bridget, Bridget is a name that points towards her. It is not who she is. She is far more than that name. And if when you are doing spirit work, you'll figure that out pretty swiftly. These are names that we have given these things that help us understand them, but they are far more than what our limited human minds can wrap around. Alrighty, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I hope this has helped you understand how to put together some kind of a ritual for yourself. Like I said, a lot of what we're trying to do with this podcast is not to give you a fish, but to teach you how to fish. And hopefully this has helped. If you need some help, don't understand ritual structure or how to actually turn a metaphor into something for ritual purposes, let us know in the comments. If you're listening to us on Spotify or YouTube, you can leave a comment right there. Or if you listen to us anywhere else, even if they say you can leave comments, they don't notify us, so you can leave a comment there, because engagement is magic. But if ever, to creationspass.com and click chat, leave a comment there, we will see it. And I would love to know, what metaphors are you playing with? I want to know how many witches are doing either Agatha-related magic or Wicked-related magic right now, because I'm looking at you over there on Witch Sky, and I know a lot of us have done a ritual singing the Witch's Road. I know that that's the thing we're doing, and so let me know in the comments. I'm really curious what all you are adding into your magical practice for this wonderful time of year, and also just what stories you're incorporating. While you're over there, if you happen to have a few dollars you can pass our way, you can either join a membership or you can support us on Patreon or Ko-fi, and that really does help us keep a roof over our head, keep food on our table, and keep the power on. If you don't have any money, don't worry about it. Just spread the word about what we're doing. We really do this because we want to help people, and the more people that can hear what we're doing, the more people we can help. Thank you so much to everybody who does that. And as we are going out, oh, blessed Parzival, sweet holy fool, archetype that we find in so many of the world's religions and so many of our folklore tales. Help us to remember that we are all the holy fool, often thinking that we are right and hopefully not tilting at windmills. Help us to find our way through the woods and at least enjoy the passage. You glean so much magic and wonder on the way. Amen.
Amen.